I looked at the single candle, flickering uncertainly on the tiny cake I had bought for myself, just to somehow mark this day, so that it would not pass completely unnoticed, would not dissolve into the series of everyday life. The soft light cast by the flame barely touched the empty chairs arranged around our old kitchen table, which had once witnessed noisy dinners, laughter, crumbs on the tablecloth and voices, but on this evening seemed especially lonely. I am 27 years old, a number that does not seem round, not fateful, but still significant. For some reason, it seemed to me that by this age everything would be different, as if life by 27 should have acquired some form, some clarity, some integrity. But honestly, what did I expect? Make a wish, Olivia, I heard Jen say, nudging me with her elbow, smiling with such inappropriate enthusiasm, as if we were actually celebrating something great, and not saving this evening from ultimate sadness. I obediently closed my eyes, held my breath, and blew out the candle, not for the sake of a wish, not for the sake of believing in a miracle, but simply because it had to be done. No matter how grown up I had become, this birthday detail still seemed obligatory, and yet, when the flame died down, all that was left inside me was a familiar, almost tame feeling of disappointment, not sharp, but slowly smoldering, like a coal hidden in the ashes. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. The next morning, while I was still lying in bed, wrapped in a blanket and in silence, the phone rang. I recognized the number immediately, and already knew what I would hear. Olivia, dear, Mom began, in that voice that sounded familiarly apologetic. We just can't make it yesterday. You see, Cassie's wedding, it completely consumed us. The venue, the flowers, the guest list, it's all such a colossal amount of work. You know that, right? Yes, of course I do, I always have. Sure, Mom, no problem, I said, my voice automatic, devoid of resentment or expectation. I had learned long ago that when it came to choosing between Cassie and me, the choice was predictable. It had always been that way, for as long as I could remember. When we were kids, Cassie had been in a private dance studio with a teacher who praised her and coached her to competition victories, and I was in a free class at a community center where there were 20 of us to one teacher, and there was no talk of solos or stage costumes. We didn't have enough money for both of us, that was just the way it was, but for some reason, they skimped on me. For her 16th birthday, Cassie got a car, used, but shiny, with a ribbon on the hood. I was happy for her then, sincerely, I guess. And then, when it was my turn, they gave me a gift card to the mall. Buy yourself something, honey, they said, smiling. I smiled back. In this house, we were taught to be happy with little things. Well, at least I was. When Cassie graduated from college, her parents threw a real party, with tents, a buffet, an orchestra, and a videographer who then edited a video to touching music. And I got dinner at Olive Garden, where the waitress got my order wrong, and suitcases from the department store. Because, as my father said, a thing is useful, it will come in handy. This pattern, the choice made again not in my favor, had become so commonplace that over time it ceased to surprise me, like the weather in Seattle or the noise of airplanes near the airport. I never heard it directly, never saw them say it openly. Cassie is our star, our pride, but everything in their gestures, in their voices, in their looks said it, and me? I was, nearby, secondary, a sound against her radiance. Earth, Olivia, come back to us. Jen giggled and waved her hand in front of my face. Want to open your gift? I nodded, shaking thoughts off myself like snow from my shoulder. Family is one thing, but I, thank God, had my people, Jen, Marcus, and Tori, 3 who never forgot, who showed up even without an invitation, with a bag of takeout, with a bottle of cheap wine, with hugs and genuine warmth. And that thoughtfulness meant more to me than an empty sorry on the phone. I unwrapped the presents with unexpected excitement, and somewhere in the hustle and bustle, a longing flared up, for the one I missed most of all, Grandma Rose, the only one in the family who seemed to really see me, not through the prism of comparison to Cassie, not through the prism of convenience or expectations, but simply, me, Olivia. Every birthday, she would give me a special gift, earrings with a story, a signed book, a piece of hand-embroidered jewelry, and whisper, looking me straight in the eye, don't let them dim your light, my girl. Last year was the first without her, the first birthday after her death from cancer, a loss I still can't get over. Her absence felt not like emptiness but like pain, sharp, physical, like something inside me had been ripped out by the roots. After her death, when everyone gathered for the reading of the will, we were in for a surprise. Grandma left the same amount to me and Cassie, $170,000 each, and while I felt awe and gratitude at that, my parents' faces tightened. They obviously expected something different. They were, as always, sure that Cassie should get more. "Well, I'll probably put it all toward a down payment on an apartment," Cassie said immediately. As soon as the lawyer finished reading the will, her voice sounded so businesslike, and her fiancé, Josh, who was sitting next to her, nodded as if they had already discussed all this. It would be responsible. The hint was clear. What she was doing with her money was smart. What I was doing would be stupid, but I didn't give in. I didn't let them put everything back in its place. I simply put the money into an investment account, without haste, without big words. I didn't know yet what exactly I wanted to do with this amount of money, but I did know. I wanted her gift to grow, to become something more, to live on as an extension of her love for me, because secretly I believed, she was still here, she still saw. Tori handed me the bottle, and her voice, soft and slightly mocking, was like a switch in my head, returning me from dark memories to a bright, if slightly foggy, evening reality. I nodded, not immediately responding, and only then, with an almost theatrical sigh, said, "God, yes, pour me another." I laughed, perhaps a little louder than the moment called for, handed her my glass, and felt the warmth of the wine begin to spread through my body, erasing the boundaries between what was and what is. We sat closer, somehow more comfortably, and Jen, with an eternal sparkle in her eyes, slapped her hand on her knee. "Well, people, come on, tell us what's new?" The evening, which began as a formal, almost forced celebration of my birthday, unexpectedly turned into a warm flow of conversations about work, about funny and sad dates, about dreams that someone cherished and someone already buried, about plans for the summer, which included camping, trips to the ocean, new recipes, and hopes. We tossed stories back and forth like marbles at a fair, laughing, sighing, arguing, interrupting each other, and somewhere in the midst of this sincere noise, I suddenly realized, here they are, my people. This is where I am really needed. Here are the ones who came, not because they have to, but because they want to be there. And for a few hours, almost until the last guests left, I forgot that I felt like a forgotten daughter, who was constantly put in second place. I just was among those who saw in me not a comparison, not a disappointment, but Olivia, real, alive, important. When the door closed behind Jen, and a thick silence crept through the apartment, I gathered up the remaining dishes, a few plates, a couple of glasses, laid out napkins, and washed everything in the sink, listening to the water dripping and the strange ringing of the glass edges under my fingers. Then, with a towel in my hand, I looked at my phone. No missed calls, not a single message from Mom or Dad, not a congratulation from Cassie, not even a belated, dry one, out of politeness. Just one quick text from Mom, sent that morning. "Olivia, can you help with the invitations to Cassie's wedding next weekend? I really need them." No greeting, no mention of them not coming, no hint that the birthday had happened after all. A week passed. I was standing in the kitchen, cooking dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, just like Grandma liked, and, while stirring the aromatic sauce, I heard the phone ring. The screen showed Mom's number. I was about to decline the call, to let voicemail do the work for me, but curiosity, stubborn and tenacious, won out. "Hi, Olivia," Mom said with such tenderness in her voice that I even looked up from the pot for a moment. "We would love it if you came to dinner tomorrow. Can you do it?" Something in her intonation made me wary, too soft, too polite, not like her. "And the occasion?" I asked, continuing to stir the sauce, as if this mechanic helped me stay calm. "Do we need a reason for a family dinner?" She laughed, almost girlishly. "We just want to see you." For a split second, I thought, what if? What if they finally understood? What if they realized that they had forgotten me, that they had hurt me, that this was not just another mistake but a wound? People can change, right? Maybe when I turned 27 and seemed like an adult, they saw in me someone equal to Cassie. "Sure," I said, biting my lip, "I'll be there at 6. "Great, honey, we'll be waiting," Mom said, and hung up. A cautious optimism, like a thin film, covered my heart. Maybe everything would change. Maybe for the first time in a long time they would see me, not as an addition to Cassie, not as a shadow, but as a person. The next evening, when I pulled up to my parents' house, the first thing I saw was Cassie's snow-white car, parked neatly next to Josh's black Mercedes. I slowed down, took a deep breath, and adjusted my dress. It wasn't special, but I'd chosen it with the idea of showing that I cared. I rang the doorbell, and almost immediately my mother opened the door, smiling as brightly as if I were a long-awaited guest at a premiere. "Olivia! Come in, everyone's here." I walked in. The dining room table was set with china, the same kind they only brought out for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Dad stood with a bottle of wine, pouring it into glasses. Josh was checking something on his phone, his brow furrowed in his usual businesslike way. Cassie was adjusting the flower arrangement in the center of the table, as if the success of the entire evening depended on the symmetry of the roses. Everyone looked up when I stepped into the dining room. "Hey, sis," Cassie said, smiling tightly. Her voice was sweet, like cloying syrup, too thick to be sincere. "I'm glad you joined us." Not a word about how they hadn't even remembered me the week before, no happy birthday, no sorry we couldn't make it, just forced smiles, polite phrases, an underlying tension that I could feel on my skin but couldn't yet decipher. We sat down to dinner. We chatted about the weather, about the golf my dad had started playing, about some news. It was all so excruciatingly formal that I almost laughed at the absurdity, and all this time I was waiting for someone to say something, to speak, to explain, but the silence around this topic was so thick that it seemed like it could be cut with a knife. When Mom brought out dessert, a lemon pie, Cassie's favorite, by the way, she suddenly cleared her throat and exchanged a look with Dad and Cassie. Something about that look immediately made me sit up straighter. "Olivia," she began, placing her napkin next to her plate, "we wanted to invite you because we need to have a serious talk about family matters." I slowly put down my fork, halfway through my slice of pie, which had suddenly become as tasteless as paper, and in that second an icy realization washed over me. This entire meal, these china plates, these forced smiles, this dessert I'd never liked but which for some reason they always served, none of it had anything to do with an attempt to make amends or acknowledge the pain they'd caused with their indifference. This was prologue. A prelude to something I didn't seem to want to hear, but could no longer avoid. "What conversation are we talking about?" I asked, keeping the tremor in my voice from trembling, although I already knew in my gut that what was to come next would make me regret coming here. Mom turned to Cassie, who straightened up as if she were about to give a speech to an audience, and, as she always did in moments of importance, cleared her throat, giving herself importance. Well, she began, lifting her chin and straightening her shoulders as if she were getting ready to accept an award. "You know that Josh and I are currently busy preparing for the wedding," she began, and her voice immediately acquired a familiar sound, with those notes of smugness, with that shade of superiority, with that measured intonation in which each word sounded like a sentence. "We've calculated all the expenses," she continued, glancing at my parents, who were sitting there with an expression of strange anticipation, as if they were waiting for my reaction to what was about to be said. "We've invited about 150 people, and considering the reservation at the Grand Plaza in the center, it's all coming out much more expensive than we initially thought." I nodded, slowly, politely, with an expression of complete disinterest, because it all sounded like just news, like a discussion of someone else's project. But judging by the looks directed at me, I guessed that a turn was about to happen. "We talked about it," Cassie said, gesturing toward Josh and Mom and Dad, "and we thought it would be logical for you to chip in. From the inheritance your grandmother left you, it would help with the wedding expenses." I stood there, staring at them in silence, waiting for someone to burst out laughing and say, "Oh, come on, Olivia, this is all a joke." But no one was laughing. Their faces were serious, focused, and something about the silent anticipation, the way Mom held her cup carefully, the way Dad looked at me with his head bowed slightly, the way Josh was looking back at his phone as if the deal was already done, all of it just confirmed that they were seriously expecting me to willingly hand over my $170,000 to pay for my sister's celebration of life. Are you serious right now?" I managed to say, my voice trembling traitorously, not from fear but from the rage I was trying so hard to contain. "I'm serious," my mother interjected, placing her hand on mine as if her touch would soften the meaning of her words. family support each other. Olivia, Cassie really does need this money, the most important thing right now is to help her. I slowly pulled my hand away and looked at each of them in turn, as if checking for an optical illusion, for collective insanity, and her inheritance. I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She got exactly the same amount as me, didn't she? It's going to go toward an apartment, Josh said calmly, without looking up. We've already started looking at options. It's important for us to invest before the end of the year. I caught my breath, from the audacity, from their certainty that my silent presence meant consent. They really expected me to give up the one gift left to me by the man who truly loved me, for someone else's celebration, for white tablecloths and champagne glasses. Suddenly it all became clear, clearer than ever. All those years of being convenient, patient, independent, all those pretty words had been a cover. They meant, "You're not a priority," and now that I had something of my own, they thought I had to give it up. "No," I said, and that little word had it all, a refusal, a boundary, an inviolability. "I'm not giving you my inheritance, Grandma left it to me, not for Cassie's wedding, not for a dress and a reception." Cassie leaned forward, her face contorted in a fury that flared instantly, like a match. "What do you need it for?" she snapped, her disdain sharp. "You're not going to get married anyway, you're not even in a relationship, you'll be alone, an old maid, and that money will just sit there like dead weight." I flinched, not from the words, from the venom in them, from the ease with which she said them, as if she had the right. I looked at my parents, expecting at least some kind of protest. But Dad noted. "Cassie's right, Olivia," he said calmly. "She needs to think about the future, she has plans, she has a family, and you? You're just saving that money, it's pointless." Mom leaned closer, as if she wanted to explain, smooth it over, soften it. "Honey, we just think Cassie needs that money more now, you've always been so independent." Independent, their eternal replacement word for unnecessary. Independent means you can handle it yourself, so, we can pass again. I stood up, the chair slid across the floor with a crash, piercing the tense atmosphere like a gunshot. "No," I repeated, looking them in the eye, "I'm not giving you my money, it's not your wedding fund, it's my gift from my grandmother, and I'm not giving it away." My mother's mask of sympathy slipped instantly, and her voice took on a steely edge. "Don't be selfish, Olivia." Selfish, because I dared to keep what was mine. Because I refused to give in again, to disappear silently behind my sister's back again? Cassie had just as much money, she could pay for her own wedding if she wanted to, let her put what she'd received into the celebration. I didn't give them time to object, I didn't want to hear another word. I turned and walked toward the door, ignoring their pleas to stop, to think, to come back. I walked, and with each step a feeling flared up inside me that I had not experienced for a long time, a feeling of strength. I drove home as if through a thick fog, not the kind that hangs over the streets in the morning, but an internal, sticky one, compressed from anger, pain and bitterness, and this tangle of feelings tightened my chest so tightly that I did not even remember how I turned into my house, how I parked, how I found myself at the door, picking up the key with trembling fingers. The entire journey from my parents' house to my apartment passed in some kind of numbness, as if my body moved automatically, and my consciousness floated somewhere nearby, not wanting to return to this reality in which my loved ones considered me obliged to part with the only thing that truly belonged only to me. My phone vibrated almost as soon as I got into the car, but I didn't look at the screen, didn't reach for it, didn't want to hear another word. When I got home, the first thing I did was kick off my shoes, turn on the kitchen light, and only then picked up the phone. 5 missed calls from my mom, 3 from Cassie, messages, a whole string, and they were all written in the same tone, full of disappointment, reproach, accusation. I was called selfish. A person who destroys a family does not understand duty, support, love. I turned off the phone, just pressed the button, without thinking. Then I poured myself a wine, not fancy, not festive, just red, heavy, tart, the kind that was supposed to soften the evening. I took a long sip, feeling the heat spreading down my throat, but the tears still did not come. I wanted to cry. I should have, I guess, but there was nothing inside, just a dull, unmoving heaviness, like ice. The next morning, out of habit, I turned on my phone, and immediately regretted it. New messages, lots of them. It turned out that my parents had called not only me, but the whole family, uncles, aunts, cousins, even my grandmother's friend who lived in another state, and now they were all writing to me, long or short, emotional or sarcastic, but equally reproachful. I scrolled through the messages, my face frozen in a stone mask, unable to believe how quickly my family had managed to organize an entire campaign against me. "You are destroying the family," they said. "You are being petty," they wrote. "Cassie is your sister, her happiness should be important to you." The message from Aunt Linda was especially telling. "Your mother told me how you behaved. I can't believe you're so stubborn. A wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Aren't you proud to help make it special?" I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't, because I didn't know what words could possibly explain how tired I was of being the one who always gave in, the one who kept quiet, the one who agreed, the one who swallowed. On Monday, I went back to work, hoping that the daily grind of meetings, schedules, reports would help push everything out of my head. I focused on the marketing project that would normally keep me engrossed to the point of oblivion, but my thoughts kept slipping back, returning to that dining room with china plates and the expectation that I would come as a victim with open hands. I couldn't believe that that entire evening, with all the smiles, the glasses of wine, the artificial warmth, had been a ploy to extort money from me. And what's worse is that they hadn't just asked, they thought they had the right to, and if I refused, then it was my fault. By Wednesday, the messages became less frequent, there were fewer of them, but their tone had changed. Now they sounded threatening. "You'll regret turning your back on your family," Dad wrote. "Blood is thicker than water, Olivia. Think before you ruin everything completely." Those words burned me. And that same night I blocked my parents' numbers, Cassie's, Josh's. I needed peace, any peace, at least for a day, but the respite was short. On Friday evening, as I turned the corner of my house, almost colliding with a cyclist, I stopped, froze, and not because someone I didn't know blocked my path, but on the contrary, in front of my entrance, right at the door, stood Mom, Cassie, and Josh. They were clearly waiting for me. They stood like a delegation, elongated backs, serious faces. For a second, I wanted to turn around and walk away, to pretend I hadn't noticed I'd gotten the wrong address, but they'd already seen me. "We need to talk," Mom called, taking a step toward them. I stopped on the sidewalk, not moving closer. Distance was my shield. "There's nothing to talk about," I said coldly. "I didn't invite you here." Cassie took a step forward, her eyes were puffy, as if she'd been crying for a long time, but her expression wasn't remorseful. "It was only hurt." "You're ruining our family," she said, her voice breaking. "Do you realize what you're doing? The whole family is mad at you." "I'm mad, and yes, I told them, I didn't ask them to get involved, but you forced me to." Mom shook her head, her expression sadder than I'd ever seen before. "We just don't understand why you're so stubborn. It's your sister's wedding. It's a special day, one day." "Then let's get this straight," I said firmly, though inside I was shaking. My voice was even, calm, despite the internal storm. "Grandma left Cassie and me the same amount of money. If the wedding was that important to her, she could use her share to pay for it." Cassie threw up her hands in despair, as if I'd suggested she sell her kidney. "Are you kidding? We've already picked out an apartment. Josh and I have plans. This money is for a place to live." "And I have plans for mine," I replied calmly, not looking away. Josh stepped forward, his face took on that cold clarity I already knew. The lawyer had stepped onto the stage. "Olivia, be reasonable. No one is asking you to give up your future. It's just that right now, Cassie's wedding is the priority for the whole family." I looked at the three of them, at Mom, with her hands clenched so tightly that her knuckles were white, at Cassie, with her face twisted with indignation, in which there was nothing left of the sister with whom I once fell asleep in the same room with the rustling of an old fan, and at Josh, whose indulgent smile reminded me of a courtroom speech, not a family relationship. And suddenly, despite the growing anger, the sudden pain in my chest and the lump in my throat, I felt peace, not fatigue. Not apathy, but an inner silence in which for the first time in a long time my own I sounded clear and confident. "My answer is no," I said, looking them straight in the eyes. "Please, leave me alone." I walked past them, feeling my legs tremble under the weight of my decision, but my back remained straight. My hands shook as I swiped my key card, and as the door slammed behind me, I heard Cassie cry out, almost with angry desperation, "This isn't over, Olivia." But for me, it was already an ending. or maybe a beginning, the beginning of boundaries I would no longer allow to be crossed. I thought this conflict, this strange street performance in which family members had become accusers, would be the worst. But I was wrong, the real storm was still coming. On Monday, over coffee before work, I unlocked my phone as usual, checking Facebook, and what I saw hit me like an icy wave. Notifications exploded, comments, likes, mentions. Mom and Cassie both posted long, heartbreaking, piously worded posts, carefully written to avoid naming me directly, but leaving no one in any doubt as to who exactly was the cause of this family tragedy. Mom's post began, "Sometimes it hurts so much when the one you sacrificed everything for turns their back on you. Parents give and give and give again, and then are left empty-handed when it's time to love in return." And there was not only bitterness in that text, but also a venomous publicity stunt. Cassie went even further, her post was pure drama. When your sister betrays you on the eve of the most important day of your life, you finally understand who truly loves you, heartbroken, but grateful for everyone who is there for us and who supports us during this difficult time. I scrolled through the comments, and each new one felt like a punch in the ribs. Family, friends, acquaintances from the past, neighbors, everyone competed to see who could offer more sympathy to Cassie and more criticism to me. Aunt Linda, of course, couldn't help but speak out. "Some people just don't understand what it means to be part of a family. My heart breaks for you, my dears." Uncle Bob added, "Awesome, shocking behavior, shame and disgrace. She doesn't deserve you." Not one of them asked a question, no. One wanted to know my side, they just believed it, because it was easier for them. It had always been that way, ever since I was a kid. Cousins received gifts from Cassie, even on my birthday. At family gatherings, all the toasts were to her accomplishments, her dance competitions, her diploma, her engagement. When I got a promotion, someone in the family asked, "Is this the same company where you still work alone, right?" I stopped expecting recognition a long time ago, but seeing the whole family now participating in a public bullying was something new. This was a new depth. I was silent, I didn't write a single comment, didn't make a single post. Any attempt to explain or defend myself would only fuel the fire, would only give them a reason to accuse me of even greater selfishness, and most importantly, I knew that this no longer surprised me. Everything was going according to a familiar scenario, just with a new scenography. But social media was just the beginning. 3 days later, in the middle of the workday, my boss, usually easygoing and relaxed, knocked on my door and said with surprising seriousness, "Olivia, please close the door and sit down." My heart sank. I walked inside, sat down, and frantically ran through in my head everything I could have done wrong. Missed a deadline? A mistake in Henderson's budget? Something wrong with the client? But the look on his face didn't suggest any of those reasons. "I got a call last night," he began, looking down awkwardly. "It was a disturbing call from your parents. They were saying some really weird and, honestly, scary things about how unreliable you are, how you betrayed your family, how you can't be trusted with important projects." I froze. I felt the blood drain from my face, my fingers turn cold. They were calling my work, they were trying to ruin my career. Those who were supposed to be my support, if not out of love then at least out of respect, were trying to paint me as a threat. For what? For a wedding? "I don't usually interfere in my employees' personal lives," the boss continued, lowering his voice, "but this bothered me so much that I decided to just talk to you directly." I swallowed, my heart was pounding so hard that it seemed like it could be heard in the hallway. "It all started with the inheritance," I began, feeling the emotions rushing to get out. But I tried my best to speak clearly. "My grandmother left the same amount to me and my sister, but when Cassie realized that her wedding would cost more than they expected, the whole family, decided that I should give up my share. They wanted me to sacrifice my money for her wedding, and she would save hers for the purchase of an apartment." I refused, and then the pressure began, first verbally, then on social media, now, calls to work. He listened in silence, then he nodded slowly, as if taking it all in. "Thank you for telling me, it explains a lot. Just know that if they try to interfere again, we'll deal with it." I left the office shaken, not so much by what they'd done as by how far they'd gone to punish me for saying no. When I finished telling my story, laying it out in detail, no exaggeration, no dramatic tone, just the way it was, a chain of actions, intentions, and consequences, my boss shook his head, as if he were Hearing not a family story but evidence of an unfair trial. God, Olivia, that's so cruel, he breathed softly, and there was more sympathy in those words than I'd heard all week. Don't worry about your job. I suspected there was more to this than just some emotional family drama. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I'm sure they haven't said the last word yet. Thank you, I said, feeling relief, however small, seep into my heart for the first time in days. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for believing me. I stood up to leave, and he just nodded. Take care, he said, and if you need anything, let me know. I thanked him again, with a quick nod, and went back to my desk, trying to settle into a routine, to latch onto something normal: work, structure, numbers and deadlines, so as not to drown completely in what was becoming increasingly absurd and frightening. I had barely sat down when my phone vibrated. The screen lit up, displaying a message from an unknown number. You are a selfish creature who doesn't deserve a family. I silently blocked the sender, but a minute later another appeared, from a different number. Everyone already knows what you did. How can you live with yourself? They didn't stop. Every day brought new numbers, new letters, new drops of poison pouring down on my head. Emails from distant relatives I barely remembered began pouring into my inbox, politely offensive, caustically insistent. One of my second cousins, with whom I hadn't spoken since my teens, wrote, I never thought you were capable of this. I can't even believe it. The tone was the same everywhere. I destroyed the family. I turned away from the blood. I let down everyone who loved me. It seemed like Mom, Cassie, and probably even Josh had done everything they could to make my life a living hell, to burn away any remaining calm and confidence from within, so that I would be completely exhausted and do what they wanted me to do all along: give up. One night, as I sat alone in the kitchen, blocking the third number of the evening that had sent me insults, I realized that the walls of my cozy, once safe space seemed to be closing in. The air became heavier. Even my favorite lamp on the windowsill, with its warm light and patterns on the lampshade, seemed part of some kind of cage. I had always been a little on the sidelines in my family, always felt like an outsider. But now it was more than just a feeling, it was a planned attack. Pressure, isolation, everything was aimed at one thing: to break me, to force me to give up myself for their convenience. And in that moment, I remembered those messages, the messages Cassie had sent me back in January. Strange, disturbing, then seeming just another prank, stupidity, which I, out of habit, left without judgment. Something deep inside me then told me, don't delete, this might come in handy. I picked up my phone and started scrolling through the messages, immersing myself in the text that I had read absent-mindedly then, but now with the focus of a surgeon. There they were, right there, the messages in which Cassie, now engaged to Josh, asked for access to my apartment, supposedly for a day, supposedly on urgent business, and then, almost without a pause, she wrote frankly, I'm going to need to use your space tomorrow afternoon. Michael is in town, and we need privacy. Don't tell anyone, okay? Thank you, you're the best. It took me a while to figure out which Michael they were talking about, until I got to the next message. You remember Michael, right? My ex. I still have feelings for him, but I'm not going to leave Josh. Michael is just funny. I scrolled through the screen, and the messages kept coming. They went on for weeks. She asked me for the key again a few times, promising to clean up after and not be late. Once, she even sent me a selfie of herself on my sofa, leaning against Michael's shoulder, holding drinks, wearing the same designer dress Josh had gotten her for Christmas, my pillow in the background, my book on the coffee table, my candles in glass jars. All of this happened in my house, in secret, and now, realizing the scale of it, I realized that I had more than just text messages in my hands. I had a weapon. Using that data, the screenshots, the messages, the photos, would have meant ruining Cassie's engagement. It would have meant depriving her of what I now understand she'd gone to such lengths to achieve, including openly bullying me. It would have been like pressing the red button, launching a nuclear warhead that would leave scorched earth in its wake. And yet, as I looked at those messages, I felt two parts of me warring: the one who grew up in Cassie's eternal shadow, who learned to be comfortable, patient, loyal even when she was being used, the one who was trained to protect her sister at all costs, and the other, the new, adult, exhausted, but still alive part of me that looked injustice in the face and for the first time in my life asked myself, why, exactly, should I keep quiet? But just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, another message arrived, short, venomous, as if ripped from someone's conversation, thrown in my face. Your parents have already told everyone what a terrible daughter you are. No one is on your side. And in that second, like a thin layer of ice cracking under my feet, something inside me actually broke, not with a bang, but quietly, imperceptibly. With that bitter snap when you realize that the person you called family is no longer on your side, and perhaps never was. They called my boss, they contacted everyone I knew, they turned my life into a battlefield, day and night, giving me no peace, and all for money that was rightfully mine, that I didn't take, that I didn't steal, that I received just like Cassie. I wasn't going to take revenge, I didn't want to stoop to their level, but in that moment, I realized that my silence wasn't an asset. It was a silent license for more bullying. I didn't give myself time to change my mind. I just opened the conversation with Cassie, selected the screenshots, the ones where she happily shared her visits to Michael, where she asked me to keep everything secret, where she admitted that she wasn't going to lead Josh because it's convenient. I attached the photos, too, the ones she'd sent me around Christmas, of her and Michael cuddling on my couch, wearing Josh's dress, with champagne and smiles that now seemed mocking. I opened Josh's contact and hit send. In the message field, I added just one line, Josh, I thought you should know what Cassie's been keeping from you. I'm sorry I have to tell you this like this. My finger hovered over the send button, but I pressed it, determined, without hesitation, and as soon as it was gone, it came, a wave of emotions, pulling in different directions, relief, as if I had finally taken a deep breath, guilt, because I knew how devastating the consequences could be, anxiety, about what would happen next, and yet, most of all, a strange, viscous, but real calm. It was all out. The truth was finally out in the light, and no matter what happened now, I knew that at least I hadn't allowed myself to be trampled into the ground in silence. Morning came too early. I slept poorly, tossing and turning, as if my body sought rest but my mind wouldn't give it. I woke to the vibration of my phone, shaking on the nightstand, glowing in the gray light of early morning, the name on the screen, Cassie. I knew I had to answer. I took a deep breath, pressed the phone to my ear, and I'd barely said hello when her voice, not just angry, but furious, piercing through the speaker, hit my ears. How could you? She screamed, her voice shaking with anger. How the hell could you, Olivia? I knew this wasn't going to be a polite conversation, but even I was taken aback by the level of her anger, her raw, unbridled fury. You betrayed me, she spat, almost choking. You ruined everything. Josh canceled everything. There's no wedding, the venue, the flowers, everything we had planned. It's all gone to hell because of you. I listened to it from the edge of my bed, and for the first time I didn't feel the need to apologize, to justify myself, to smooth things over, because there was only one truth. You betrayed him first, Cassie, I said, quietly but firmly. You cheated on him, and you used my apartment to do it. She gave a sharp sob, her voice began to shake not with rage, but with despair. That was different. That meant nothing. He shouldn't have found out. I closed my eyes for a second. The absurdity of her words almost knocked me off balance. In her world, the real betrayal was not that she lied, but that I revealed the truth. You ruined my life, she screamed again. Now you're happy? Happy? I thought about it, and answered honestly, no, I'm not happy, but I don't regret it either. She paused, and then added, you tried to ruin my life first. You, Mom, Dad, all of you. You called my work, you turned the family against me. Because of what? Because I didn't want to give you my money for the wedding, while you were calmly planning to save yours to buy an apartment. It's not the same thing. She screamed again, almost breaking down. It's the same thing for me, I answered, and pressed the end call button. I knew it wasn't over, and sure enough, within an hour the phone vibrated again. My parents. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. I only heard one message, from my father. His voice was cold as ice, and every word was condemning, like a sentence. What you did is unforgivable. Fix it, Olivia. Call Josh. Tell him it was all a lie. Bring him back for your sister, for the family, or you're not our daughter anymore. Then the messages started coming. My mother would sometimes write with guilt. Maybe we were too strict, but you know how much this hurts us. And sometimes with threats. If you say anything more to Cassie, I won't be responsible for the consequences. Cassie, as if in a fever, sent long paragraphs full of rage, resentment, reproach. I stopped reading, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew the main thing in this war for attention, approval, money, and power. I no longer played by their rules. Days passed, then weeks, filled with silence that I once feared, but now learned to find comfort in it. And then one lazy Sunday morning, when I was drinking coffee on the balcony, wrapped in a blanket and watching the heavy clouds slowly float across the sky, I got a call from cousin Jenna, not the one with whom I was especially close, but the one who always watched family dramas with surprise and light irony, as if they were a TV series and not real life. We talked about nothing until suddenly her voice became a little more tense. "You know, Josh didn't go back to Cassie," she said, "despite all of Mom's attempts, despite her persuasion and promises. He stuck to his guns." He showed her the evidence, and she, foolishly hoping for his forgiveness, confessed everything. She thought he would forgive, but he didn't. I listened, and something inside me shifted, not glee, no, more sadness, but without the pain. The wedding was indeed off, the deposits were not returned. The spacious hall overlooking the river announced a new date for other lucky people, and the expensive dress, the very one, lacy, tight, perfectly tailored to Cassie's figure, now hung in her closet, never to be worn. And, of course, in our family's opinion, it was my fault. I didn't argue, I just stopped trying. I focused on work, on the projects that needed my attention, on hanging out with coworkers who became friends, on nights out with Tori and Jen where we laughed like the world was simple and life was easy. I started paying closer attention to myself, to the things that truly brought me joy. And, yes, I still checked my investment account every now and then, watching that same amount of money my grandmother had left me slowly but steadily grow. I decided it was time to use some of that money toward a down payment on my own place, not because Cassie had done it, not because anyone expected me to do it, but because it was now a decision that came from within. It was mine, my choice, my right. It was a little over 3 months after the engagement ended when I was sifting through a pile of mail, including catalogs, electric bills, and a card from Marcus, when I found a neatly written envelope in a stack of letters. I opened it and froze. Inside was a formal, notarized statement signed by my parents, cold, emotionless lines. "We, Richard and Diane Miller, hereby declare that we no longer acknowledge Olivia Miller as our daughter. She has caused irreparable harm to our family by deliberately cutting herself off from our lives. From this day forward, we sever all family ties and obligations." I read it twice, then laid it on the kitchen table. It should have crushed me, broken me, completely finished me off, but instead I felt a strange, almost solemn lightness, as if a long-awaited door had opened and I had stepped out into a space where I could breathe. They thought they were giving me punishment. In fact, they set me free. In the months that followed, I found the apartment I wanted, with the big windows, the warmth of the morning sun, the kitchen I'd dreamed of. I used up some of the inheritance, as I'd planned. I started dating again, not because I was looking for someone to fill the void, but because I was interested in getting to know people again. I joined a hiking club, discovered hiking, bike trails, campfire conversations with strangers who didn't know my past or my last name, and I started therapy. I sat down, for the first time in years, across from someone who wasn't a judge or a parent, and I said, I was the unloved child, and I'm done with it. Sometimes, in the evening hours, I thought about Cassie. Had she found a new fiancé? Does she still live with our parents, sharing the silence with a mother who probably regrets the letter but will never admit it? Has she ever thought about how we painted each other's nails together in the 5th grade, laughed at Dad's jokes, or cried over the same book? I don't know. I didn't write, and neither did she. On the nightstand, next to the lamp and the books, stood a photograph of Grandma Rose, in a black frame, under glass. She looked at me with that special smile, full of love and strength. Sometimes I talked to her in my mind, asking, "Would you be proud of me?" And always in response a warm inner feeling, as if her voice was whispering again, "Don't let them dim your light, my Olivia." For so many years I allowed it, afraid, ashamed, smoothing over the edges. Now no. Exactly 1 year after the night everything fell apart, I received a small box in the mail with no return address. Inside was my grandmother's silver locket, the one she wore every day, the one my mother took for granted after the funeral. There was no note, no explanation, no name, but I just knew who sent it, and that was probably the last, silent confession. Maybe my mother understood. Maybe she finally remembered that my grandmother had always been on my side. I hung the locket around my neck, walked over to the mirror, and looked at my reflection. The woman I saw didn't hide her shoulders, didn't avoid my gaze, she stood straight, confident, without trying to take up less space. The one who always apologized for her existence was gone. I was left real, whole, strong, free from the endless desire to be good in the eyes of others. Yes, Grandma left me money, but her real gift wasn't the bill, the amount, it was a push, an opportunity, an open door that I finally walked through, choosing myself. Some might say my story is tragic, the loss of my family, the break with my parents, my sister, but the truth is, I may never have truly had them. I touched the locket, cold and heavy as a memory, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma." Outside, spring was gently breaking through, the last vestiges of winter were melting, everything around me was being born anew. And my light, the one they had so carefully extinguished for years, now burned brighter than ever, and no one, ever, would be able to outshine it again.